Thermo 9, I didn't see the rules of thumb in the NC's handbook. I'm assuming we just need to memorize them. Correct. They are in the reference handbook, and you will memorize them, not because you need to, but because you're going to see them so many times that you won't be able to prevent yourself from memorizing them even if you wanted to. But in terms of where those are in the book, let's just show those real quick. So you can use the search term heat gain calculations. Heat gain. There we go. But they don't write it out in one continuous, like I like to just write it this way. Also, they don't use 1.08, they round it to 1.1, which is fine. That's never going to be, that's never going to be the reason you end up getting it wrong. But here's how they write it. C sub T times Q sub S times delta H for 4.5 CFM delta H. That's one option for the total heat gain. For the sensible heat gain, they write it this way, and then they write it this way. QS equals 1.1 times QS delta T. Very funny way to write it because they use lowercase q for the total sensible heat and big Q for the volume flow rate. And then they tell you what the values of those are. That Q, big Q, needs to be in CFM. And where did it say that? Probably somewhere up here. Q sub S. Q sub S is the standard flow rate in CFM. So that carries all the way down here. And the delta T. So technically that's where that's located. And then there should be one more for latent. Yep, here it is. So latent is this guy, 4840 QS delta W. That's probably the one you're least likely to memorize, but you should know that it exists. You have the total heat gain, the sensible heat gain, and the latent heat gain. So until you memorize these, I would try to remember heat gain calculations as a search phrase. That'll bring you to this page, and you can be reminded, and then eventually you'll have done that enough times where you will no longer need a reminder, and you won't consult this page at all. and that's sort of a milestone in your study process. And then the other one was 500 GPM delta T. That's here as well. Scroll down on that second page. They give it like this, little q. You'll see me write big Q a lot, but it's the total heat transferred with in water. 500 times big Q, which is the volume flow rate in GPM, has to be in GPM for this rule of thumb equation to work, times the delta T. And then that result comes out in BTU per hour. I've never used this in my life, but you can certainly play around with that as well. Density, specific heat capacity, because ultimately all of this comes from the more theoretical framework of Q equals MCP delta T, M dot CP delta T. And that's fine too. Some of the purists out there want to use this equation, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's where all this other stuff comes from. The rule of thumb equation is much faster and easier. So you're going to prefer to use that once you get comfortable with it. If you have the volume flow rate in GPM and you have the delta T, then you're going to go straight to this. It would be silly to convert that volume flow rate to a mass flow rate. But if you like to do extra work, then you're welcome to. And also, if you're given a mass flow rate instead of a volume flow rate, maybe you prefer this equation. So you should know that both exist. And not every time you do a problem do you need to reconcile the fact that these are ultimately the same idea. But maybe once, just for the hell of it, when you have some extra time doing a problem, you might like to do it both ways and convert all the units and just sort of nerd out for a little bit, be an engineer, and remind yourself that everything checks out up and down.